is a little bit about me. That picture there with my granddaughter has nothing to do with anything other than I'm a new grandmother and I take all opportunities to show her picture. So that is Lincoln. She is going to be 1 year old this month. So really had nothing to do with anything other than I just take every opportunity. So there you are. But the other picture is of my website and my online counseling psychology. But so if we want to talk about resilience, would you guys do me a favor and just think for a second about what the term means to you? And if you wouldn't mind throwing in chat, can they chat right now? Yeah. Um, any terms that come to mind when you see the word, think of the word resilience. And there's no right or wrong here. Um, just share with me, if you wouldn't mind, uh, what words come to mind with that. I don't know if I'm going to be able to see the chat, am I? Oh, there it is. Yes. Oh, good. Look at you guys go. Okay, so being strong, yep. Survival, overcoming adversity, the ability to bounce back when taken a blow, absolutely. Bouncing back quicker from adverse situations, bounce back, copy with whatever life throws, coping, yeah, probably adaptability, ability to bounce back, keep going, perseverance, silence and getting on with it, whatever the weather. Nice. Resilient means charging on, even when it's easy to give up, adaptability, surviving. Love what Hella said. Yeah, no matter what the weather. If you're English, we got to talk about the weather, right? So no matter what. Yeah, so absolutely. These are all excellent terms. I'll show you a bit what came up from the dictionary. So concerning the ability to withstand, recuperate, or rebuild quickly, possessing elasticity, which right along with everything you guys said. What else do we have here? The ability of a person to endure and recover from adverse conditions, exactly what several of you said. Synonyms are endurance, flexibility, resistance, elasticity, strength, durability, sturdiness. And it comes from bounce back, which is exactly kind of what you all said, which makes me happy because I do think there has been some confusion. I've attended some talks and lectures around the word, and what resilience is not. Resilience is not something that you're just born with and you're lucky. Sometimes we feel like we know people and we just think, look at them just skating through life. They don't seem to ever really get down by anything. Nothing really ever takes them all the way down. We might even think they don't go through anything because they always seem to be doing so well. That's probably not true. But resilience is not something that you're just lucky enough to be born with, and that if you have it, you have it. If you don't, you don't. We have certainly found in a lot of research, certainly more recently, that resilience can be taught, that it's something that, as you guys are listing all of those things that it is, there are ways in which to get under that and to really teach that to people, and for all of us to be able to think about the way that we approach things and the way that we react to things, and that to make ourselves more resilient. And it also is not something that just keeps bad things from happening. People that just don't seem to care about things. That's not resilience. Resilience is that bounce back quality that no matter what happens, you do have this way innately, eventually, through, thinking about things and understanding the way in which you self-talk, you have a way that you can actually bounce back from challenging events. So thank you all for that. If you have any other questions about that as I'm going, please don't hesitate to throw that in the chat. So we want to talk about thinking traps. And the reason I jump right to thinking traps is because of time constraints. I can't go into a real, a whole resilient workshop here, but I want to give you guys a taster in ways in which maybe you can think a little bit about and see yourself, recognize yourself maybe in some of these traps, because these traps are the very thing that can keep us from resiliency, because we get caught into a loop of thinking about things a certain way that aren't, it's not as helpful in a way that we could then bounce back from something, or all of the other different terms that you guys were using. These thinking traps can actually stop us, prevent us. So the first one there is jumping to conclusions, which is pretty self-explanatory. Maybe you've done this, maybe you know people. The jumping to conclusions is typically somebody who's, if I see a situation and I just sort of in my mind already decide I know everything about what's happening. The jumping to the conclusion part usually leads to a very spontaneous reaction. So that can be impulsive. And all of these thinking traps kind of fall in line with the negative thinking. So you don't typically jump to a good conclusion, you jump to a bad conclusion, you jump to a negative conclusion. And so in jumping to that negative conclusion, then if you allow that to just ride out, unstopped inside your brain, there can be a very impulsive action after. Have you ever jumped to a conclusion, said something, and then found out later that you were completely wrong, or had somebody say something to you that was completely inaccurate? That impulsive behavior that then comes from that thinking trap of the jumping to conclusions can be very damaging. And then now you've got to kind of try to wind back from that. So think about that in terms of where you just kind of decide something ahead of time before you have all the facts. And as I said, typically a negative conclusion. Tunnel vision, you may already kind of have figured out, but it's sort of that, that way in which maybe you filter out everything else and you just see what you want to see. Where there was evidence of both a positive and negative situation, or there was something going on in the room, but all you were focusing on was the one thing. It's one of those things where that tunnel vision, you filter out the rest of the world so that what you believe to be true is what you see, and you prevent yourself from seeing anything to the contrary. Once again, we have a tendency to filter out maybe things that are more positive, and especially if we're feeling something negative about ourselves, we may then filter out any information that could show us or give us a more balanced view of the situation. The next one, magnifying and minimizing. This is one that I think a lot of us do. It's sort of like tunnel vision, but it's more that you're in a situation and you believe something to be true, and you bring closer to you facts that will help prove whatever you've decided, and you basically minimize anything else. You don't even see it. Have you ever had that happen where somebody's like, did you see whatever in the room? And I didn't see that at all because I was so focused on whatever. There's an interesting old YouTube clip out there. I don't know if you guys have ever seen, but it's where they ask you before you view the clip to watch these people with a basketball, and they've got different colored basketballs, I believe, and they want you to count how many times the white basketball gets passed. Have you guys, any of you seen this one? So the instruction before you turn on the video is count how many times the white basketball is passed. So that's your marching orders. That's what you have your mind ready to focus on. So the video plays and you count. And at the end of the video, instead of saying to you, there were 6 passes, they say, did you see the gorilla? And this happened to me, so I know it's true. I've already told you now, so you guys can't do it. But when you go back and watch the same video, sure enough, somebody in a gorilla suit walks literally right through the passing. I did not see this gorilla. I mean, they were their human size dressed in a gorilla suit, and I didn't see it. So I minimized anything that was going to be out of, that was going to confuse me or prevent me from the task at hand, which was counting the number of white basketballs getting passed. That's magnifying and minimizing. And once again, our tendency is to magnify the negative, minimize the positive. The last one is near and dear to my heart, personalizing. So this is, where things are my fault. it's a self-blame kind of thing. You have an argument with somebody, there's a situation of a misunderstanding, anything. There's an internal, right away, a little internal switch that says, "Ah, that was your fault. You know that was your fault." Um, I'm recovering, so I definitely work on that, and I see it when it's happening, and it's liberating when I can feel myself moving away from it, when I can recognize that I'm doing it, and then it eases. Because once again, the problem with this thinking trap, and all of them really, is that then if you get stuck in that idea that it's always your fault, or somehow this is something you've done wrong, then the ability to change is cut off from you. You don't believe that you can change. You don't believe that you can learn, and because you feel there's a fatal flaw. So that's really dangerous and really can keep people stuck in very negative thinking. The next one is externalizing. And so that's kind of a little bit the opposite. It's just that it's everybody else's fault. Might have known someone like this, or you might be like this. So that's that person that just never sees themselves responsible for anything. It's this talk didn't go well because Zoom was glitchy, or my light didn't work because somebody must have unplugged it. There's always a sense that something out there is working to sabotage me, and I have to make sure I blame the outside world. The problem with that is there's no responsibility. Then you don't take any responsibility for what you're doing. I'm not talking about going all the way to personalizing and self-blame all the time, but certainly a balanced view of knowing that at times maybe you are responsible and that there's something to do about that. So externalizing everybody else's fault. Overgeneralizing is sort of along the lines of a few of these, but it's more specific in the fact that you might just assume a general view of someone. Like, you've ever met someone and just said, well, they're just stupid. Maybe you don't say those words, those aren't nice, but maybe you do kind of make a snap judgment about somebody, or a snap judgment about a situation. You generalize it. That's just the way it is. And it's, once again, a fatal flaw, because you just believe there's no change possible. Mind reading, this is a big one. This is probably my baby after personalizing. And I feel personally put upon when people don't know something that I want, or that I've requested. Like, Christmas time, my husband and sons don't magically know that I want some new sunglasses, and I get my feelings hurt, but I never told them. So it's kind of a twofold here. It can be that you expect people to mind read you, and then you get your feelings hurt. You're a little bit of a martyr, and you don't like that. I shouldn't have to tell you. You should just know. And then there's you mind reading, other people, you assuming things about other people, or not communicating to other people. So mind reading is one of those things about communication. We think we know what other people are thinking, or we want people to just know what we're thinking, and then we get upset when it doesn't happen. And the last one, emotional reasoning. This is one that I think it's interesting, because as much as in therapy, I work with people all the time on their emotions, and I try to tell people your emotions are always valid. Whatever you feel, you feel. You can't say to yourself, "Oh, I'm sad, but I'm not going to be anymore." You're sad, and there's information in that emotion for you. But emotional reasoning is where we pretty much decide everything through our emotions. So if I'm feeling sad, it colors my view of everything that I'm doing, everything that I'm seeing, every way that my motivation or my confidence. So that emotional reasoning at time can be very faulty, because the emotion is valid, but it doesn't necessarily mean what we then make it mean, if that makes sense to you. It's also very impulsive at times. If you feel something, angry, frustrated, and you act from that emotional place before you have all the facts. Emotional reasoning can really get us into trouble in a lot of ways, because we aren't thinking sort of with our head and our heart, if that makes sense. So is this crazy town, or does anybody see themselves? And you don't have to come forward and tell me if you see yourself, but does anybody sort of recognize themselves in any of these thinking traps? Hella, all of them.
Does anyone want to share?
Oh, thank you,
anything?
Michelle. Yeah.
Put your hands up if you want to share any comments on that. No? They're all too shy.
Well, I do it a lot with my job, Bonnie, you know, working in a multi-level marketing industry, you're always prejudging people. So there's a lot of that. A lot of what you've said happens without giving it a name in my world, if that makes sense.
Yeah. 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 I think this happens for all of us without giving it a name a lot of times. And we breeze right past this, and then we don't realize why things are now not working out. You know, we don't even recognize this part that goes on inside of our brain. And the other thing I'll say is a lot of this is very habitual. So if I learned a bit of self-blame and, way of thinking about myself from some of the trauma from my childhood, even though that's a long time ago and I've done a lot of work on myself and feel very good about myself in most ways, there's just that sense of that I have a habitual way of where I like to relate to things, and it can get in my way if I'm not kind of aware of it, so that I can work to change that habit, if that makes sense.
I think also I'd like to say, am I on? Yeah. The magnifying and minimizing, I'd never actually given it a title. I like the fact it's alliterated because I'll remember it more. But I think sometimes I'm so focused on something that really that analogy is I don't see the gorilla or the giraffe that's sitting next to me, because I am it's one thing looking at, and you can miss something. I mean, I'm quite aware of a lot of things, but when I'm in that mode, and now that you've kind of drawn attention to it, I think you've got to recognize it in order to deal with it.
Yeah.
Well,
it's the awareness.
It is, and I'm normally really level-headed, but last week I can tell you I probably had all of those things going on in 1 week, and I just think, oh, you can be so affected by external forces around you that it can really affect how you think and feel about stuff at that particular time. Do you think, or not? Yeah.
Yes. And I think you also brought up a really good point, is there are times all of us can feel a little more vulnerable to things, feel a little more sensitive to things. And I think the hardest time to be aware of these things are when we're exceptionally stressed or worried or tired, when there's a lot going on that, is kind of backing up on us. And hello, let's say COVID, right? So, be kind to yourself. I hope I said this. I'll say it again if I didn't. This is not there's no way that I want you to identify these things and go, oh, see, I suck. We all do these things. But the great thing is that we can change them. We can work on them and become aware of the way in which we react to things and change them where they're not working. They work for us in some aspects at certain times. Like Hella was saying, sometimes you're focused on something and you don't see the gorilla. Maybe right now you don't need to see the gorilla. It's only when it causes you trouble, when it causes problems for you or your relationships. And Victoria, thank you for sharing. Exactly. You're talking about, as a child and what your grandpa used to do. This is exactly those kind of things. And think about it as a child, any of you who have children or have been around children, you didn't choose to take on that. It was something that happened. And then that's how you made sense of it in your mind. All I'm asking for you to do is become more aware of that. So then where it causes you issues, you can try to counteract it. You can try to change it so that you don't get trapped in these places where, it's just a ruminating kind of hamster wheel. And just back to the whole point of this talk, it's we want to cultivate resilience. We want to cultivate that ability to bounce back. We all need it right now more than ever. So when we get caught in our thinking traps, when we get caught in these places that are not helpful to us, we by very nature are preventing ourselves from bouncing back. It's the exact next step is that we will stay in our space of wherever we are. It will not help us. So that's why it's really, really critical that we become aware of these things, but not to beat yourself up about them. So let's talk about what to do about it, shall we? So that we all can feel better. So what do I do and how to avoid this? So, maybe I shouldn't have said avoid so much as how do we deal with it? Because once again, I don't care how long I will work on being somebody who personalizes things. I will always have that tendency, I think. I think part of it just sort of has built some pretty deep grooves in my brain. But I do stop myself when I'm doing it now. And I ask myself some of these questions. So these will apply to some of the thinking traps better than other thinking traps, but I just thought in the interest of time, I would just list them all. So sort of the big one is like, what evidence do you have to support your belief? So when you start thinking about it being your fault, or you start thinking about some negative belief about something due to your tunnel vision, what evidence do you actually have? And sometimes we will even lie to ourselves here. I mean, sometimes we'll still go, well, yeah, I know, because when Debbie looked at me, I could tell this talk was going horrible. That's self-talk, right? If you are continuing to lie to yourself, you're still not going to get yourself out of the trap. So bring in other people, ask somebody. I'll ask Hella, how'd you think the talk went? And then maybe Debbie will tell me too. What evidence do I have to support this? Is it just because I'm nervous? Is it just because I want to do a good job? Yes and yes. Does that mean that my belief is wrong or right? So what is the actual evidence? Am I looking at the big picture? Am I looking at the whole story? Or am I choosing to just pick something out that I'm magnifying? Or am I reading somebody's mind and they haven't said anything to me, but I saw them frown a little bit, so that was the end of it. So am I looking at the big picture, or am I just cherry picking little things out that serve my purpose? What are the challenges I got a typo, I'm sorry. What challenges someone's character, challenging someone else's character, what does that do for me? And that's sort of in the, the overgeneralizing or the mind reading. When I decide that someone else is fatally flawed because they didn't read my mind, or I overgeneralize a situation and just decide that person is just not worth knowing based on something that I make up in my mind. What is that doing for me? And be really honest with yourself. Why are you why are you making up a story for the situation? Maybe you feel insecure about something. Maybe you're scared that, something isn't going to go your way. Maybe you're just feeling a little bit vulnerable. That's all right, but recognize that and then backing away from the definitive thinking trap is what's helpful here. Are there any good things that happen? Sometimes we'll run through, like tonight, I'll be running through this talk in my mind where I felt it went well, where I felt maybe I stumbled over my words, the typo on my presentation. Where are there any good things that happened? Did I feel like I got my message across? Was it just enjoyable to meet a group of wonderful new people? What are the good things that happened? How much am I blaming in the situation? Maybe I'm blaming myself, maybe I'm blaming someone else. Blame is not a great thing to do, and we all do it. I heard recently a clip from a Brene Brown talk. I don't know if you guys listen to her at all, but she's well worth listening to. And she was talking about that she blames, that she's a blamer. And she had some story of where she was in the kitchen and she dropped her favorite coffee mug. And even though her husband wasn't in the room, it was his fault. And she had a whole story that she told herself and why it was her husband's fault that she broke this favorite coffee mug. And she recognizes that she's a blamer, and why that she does it. It's this real deflect from her own self because she doesn't want to feel the vulnerability. Did I communicate correctly or clearly in the situation? Maybe something happened and I find that I actually didn't communicate what I wanted, or I didn't communicate clearly what I needed, or I didn't have a conversation asking them what they needed. Was there clear communication? Am I expecting others to just know what I want? This is a big one, you know, that martyr complex. Well, if they knew me, they'd know, you know. I don't know if any of you do that, but what am I expecting others to just know, you know? And is that fair? And have there been any times when my feelings are separated from the facts? And this is you know, not to get too deeply psychological, but you know, we can at times go through something that triggers an old pain, an old wound, something that we've kind of carried around for a long time. The current situation triggers that old wound. So the old wound gives us all kinds of emotions that's not necessarily related to the current situation, kind of maybe called overreacting. We all do it, right? We feel it. We feel ourselves reacting to something sometimes and go, this seems a little over the top, but you're already half gone, so you just go with it. So thinking about how your feelings can be separated from the facts sometimes, and trying to come back to a factual way of looking at things, because in that way you can back off from any number of the thinking traps that kind of send you off into a tailspin. And like I said, the biggest challenge of those thinking traps is there's no way out. There's no resolution. They don't get us to any place usually. All they do is validate places that we kind of already sit that keep us stuck and keep us stuck and away from resilience. We want to bounce back. We want to be more elastic in the way in which we approach things. I mean, especially now, we want to be able to respond to things in a way that is more factual and more based on what we know. We don't need to add any fuel to the COVID fire. It's big enough all on its own. So make sure you stay clear of anything, any trap in your own mind where you're starting to make it bigger with worry or concern or blame, because that's not helpful. It's not going to help you in the end. And it certainly isn't going to prove to be resilient. Okay, so that's sort of the talk. I just wanted to just end with sort of there are four sort of pillars. Oh, I heard an echo all of a sudden. 4 pillars of a belief about that I believe that you can all sort of hold on to around thinking traps and resiliency. Number 1, and should have it above my head along with my big apple, is change is possible. I firmly believe that. I believe it at my very core. I don't think I could do this work. I believe it for myself and I believe it for others. So change is definitely possible. We have to think though. We can't just go by our habitual ways of being. We have to think about how we're thinking. We have to notice and become aware of the traps so that we can change them. You want to think accurately. You want to be factual based and think accurately. And last one is you want to focus on strengths. Focusing on your strengths, focusing on other people's strengths, focusing on the way in which we can get through these things so that in the end, it's about bouncing back. It's not about succumbing, you know, to the stress and to any of the worry. So that's that. I wonder.
That was really good, Bonnie. That was really, really good. So
thank you.
Rooms, I was going to get them to talk about what areas do they need to work on to cultivate their resilience. Yeah. And then we'll come back in about 10 minutes. Right, I'm just going to, if the room leaders can just make a few notes, so I'll just run down the list. So room 1, the room leader is Michelle. Room 2, the room leader is Denise Rayner. Room 3, Julia Sondak. And room 4, shall I make Bonnie the leader?
Yeah.
Let's make Bonnie the leader. And I'll come and join one of the rooms because we've got 3 rooms of 3 and 1 of 4. So when you see the room number clicking up, if you can click on it and join, and then we'll see you back here